Now that you all know and have done Punnett squares, figuring out dominant and recessive, I'm going to have you calculate genotypic and phenotypic ratios. Someone tell me what the genotype is. Part of your vocabulary. Mandy? Genotype is the genetic makeup. That means when I'm doing a Punnett square, my genotype is the alleles that I have for my offspring. So, if genotype relates to my genes, what is phenotype?
What?
Phenotype. It's in your notes. You can look at your notes. What is the phenotype? Alyssa?
Physical features you can see.
Physical features you can see. Examples of which would be the color of a flower, whether it's purple or white, your hair color, your skin color, the shape of your nose, your ears. Those are examples of phenotype. And you can actually calculate the ratios for your genotype and phenotype. We call those genotypic ratios and phenotypic ratios. So look back at your Punnett square from yesterday on the colors for the purple and white flowers. And I gave you two heterozygous parents, which means they're purple, but they both have an allele for the white flower. And when you fill out your Punnett square, it looks something like this. All right, if I'm looking at this, how many offspring do I have that will be homozygous dominant? Cassandra? One. Which one would that be?
The one in the top left.
Top left, the one that has the two capital letters, the two dominant alleles. So I'd start with a 1, and then I put a semicolon next to it, or just a colon. All right, the next question I ask myself when calculating the ratio, how many heterozygous offspring do I have? Brian? Which two? Why are they the heterozygous ones? That's right, they have two different alleles, a dominant and a recessive. So then I put a 2. Add this to your notes from yesterday. It will be part of your notebook check. All right, so I have 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous. How many homozygous recessive do I have? Amy? Which one? This one? Why is it the homozygous recessive? That's right, there's 2 lowercase letters, which means there's 2 recessive alleles. So there I have it. This is your genotypic ratio. I have 1 that's homozygous dominant, 2 that are heterozygous, and 1 that is homozygous recessive. And if you notice, if I add these numbers, what do I get? 4. How many squares do I have in my Punnett square? 4. So that's an easy way to check yourself is when you're done with your ratios, if they add up to being 4, that means you've represented each of the offspring. And that's my genotypic ratio. So I've looked at the alleles. Now I want to figure out what the phenotype of my offspring will be. That means, in this case, I'm going to ask myself, how many flowers will be purple and how many flowers will be white? So looking at this Punnett square, how many of my flowers, how many of my offspring will be purple? Iris? Okay, let me give you a hint. I know that capital P is the dominant allele, and that the dominant allele is purple, right? So how many of my offspring have a capital P? 3. That means 3 of my offspring, since they have that dominant allele, are going to be purple. Well, how many of my offspring are going to be white then? 1. And 3 plus 1 is? 4. Do you all have this in your notes? All right, you still have some time. What I'm going to show you how to do now is calculate the percentage of what your offspring could be. So say I've got these 2 traits, I've got a purple and a white flower. Well, I want to figure out what the probability is and the percentage of my offspring being purple or white. So here's an easy way to think about it. How many quarters are in a dollar? 4. How much is each quarter worth? 25. So it's almost as if each one of these squares is worth 25%. Because all 4 together would equal 100% of your possible genotypes for your offspring. Correct? Okay. So if I have 3 purple flowers, what percentage would that be? 75. Are you getting excited? Wow. 75%. Because I have these 3 right here. Well, what does that mean for my white flowers? What percentage of offspring do I have that are white? 25. And 75 plus 25 equals? 100. Okay. What I'm going to have you do now, I'll leave this up here as an example for you. What I'm going to have you do is look at the 3 we did at the beginning and calculate the genotypic and phenotypic ratios and the percentage of your offspring for these 3.
Miss Schmidt, can we see Alyssa Manziel in the library, Isabel?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
What I'm going to have you do, and keep this in mind, when you're calculating these, you may not have 3 numbers for your genotypic ratio. When you're looking at genotype, you're looking to see whether you've got homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. Depending on the parents you have, you may not have any homozygous recessive offspring. So you may only have 2 or maybe even 1 number for your ratios, depending on the offspring. Does that make sense? You all can work in your groups together and ask each other questions in order to figure out what the ratios are for each of the squares. That means you'll be doing it for the dog's tail, the eye color, and the bird's legs. So does anyone have any questions before we get started? All right. Are you up for For now, what I did is what I did on the board. I looked to see how many each type of genotype, which is where I got the 1, 2, 3, and then I'm looking to see what kind of physical characteristics. So this one, so even though I've got 3 here,
Oh, wait, that's you too, yeah.
this percentage comes up. And the percentage based off the phenotype. Does that make sense? I got you. I'll teach you. I'll teach you. Yes.
I thought I did first when I saw this.
But which one does it go to though? Because you've got 2 types of ratios. You have your genotypic and your phenotypic. Let me try and say this one. Genotypic ratio is when you look at the alleles. You're looking at these for your genotype. Phenotype is when you figure out what physical characteristics your offspring are going to have. So that's why the numbers are different on mine. Does that make sense? So after looking at these to see what different types of genotypes you have to figure out which trait whether they're all going to have long legs, or all going to have short legs, or it's all going to be or you're going to have, like I said here, you have 3 purple flowers and 1 white flower. You have to figure out how many of your offspring will have long legs and how many will have short legs. To find the genotype, you have to ask. Yes, Johnny? Genotype matter genes. These represent so what you're going to do is you're going to look at the alleles to find your genotype. You're going to see how many different sets of alleles. Are these two the same? Are these two the same? Are these two different? What that means is you're going to have 2 that are homozygous dominant and just 2 that are heterozygous. See how on the board I had 3 different numbers? That's because I had 3 different genotypes. You won't always have that. So that's why I mentioned it can be different depending on what the parents are. Phenotype will look at the physical characteristics. So that means I have to look at this and say, what or how many items are going to have short tissue, how many are going to have long tissue. And then once you determine that, that's going to give you your phenotype. For example, on the board, when I have the 3 and 1, I looked at the phenotypes for my flowers and decided 3 of them would be purple because they had that dominant purple allele, and the other ones, there were 2 sets of lower genes, those would be white. Does that make sense? Okay.